Hello, I'm Jo Hemmings, Behavioural Psychologist, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Agents Together Winning Ways series. Today I want to focus on understanding the ways in which your everyday behaviour might have changed over recent months and how you can manage that change to maximise both your work productivity and your job fulfilment. When talking about behaviour, it's really not just about what we're doing, it's also about how we think about what we're doing. It takes an average of 66 days to form a new automatic behaviour and a similar time to break it. So in theory, a lot of our current behaviours 12 plus weeks on from the start of lockdown have now become new behaviours. And not just new, but behaviours on autopilot. Behaviours that you may have to give some consideration to undoing and now that lockdown restrictions are easing. There is also the 21-90 rule. That's 21 days to form a new habit, stick with it for 90 days, and it becomes a normal part of your everyday lifestyle. So behaviour change is a complex business. Some of it is under our own control, and some of it has become automatic responses. Take the simple business handshake, for example. It was so second nature to most of us that it seems to take ages to remember not to do it. Remember that brief period of arm pumping, foot pushing and various other odd behaviours that we tried to replace it with? Now, according to the science of behaviour, we're going to have to remember to make it part of our everyday habits when we're allowed to do it again. There are changes in behaviour that are driven by government recommendations. Research has shown, for example, that regular hand washing was running at 35% of people doing it in early March, but that shot up to 70% just a month later in early April. That's compliant protective behaviour. Of course we were doing it. But interestingly, by mid-May, that 77% of regular hand washers had dropped back to 63%. Was that a belief that the worst of the pandemic was over? Was it a lack of trust in government advice? Boredom of the routine? Probably all three of these things and others. That's just an example of how our behaviour is influenced by overt, compliant behaviour, as well as less conscious, covert thinking. We have been through a raft of moods, feelings and emotions during the last few months. Not only professionally, of course, but through our social lives, our personal lives and our family lives. There will be a few of us that haven't felt at least one of these negative feelings and emotions, perhaps for an hour or so here and there for some, while others would have felt it and may still be feeling it for weeks, now becoming months. Some of those feelings are anxiety, fear, longing, nostalgia, boredom, frustration, panic, anger, worry, isolation, sadness. Adapting to an ever-changing world and its responsibilities adds so many layers to those feelings. People who felt like they had excelled at their careers are now finding they've got to juggle this with homeschooling their children or caring for an elderly parent, for example. Coping with multiple responsibilities is anxiety-provoking and stressful because the way that our lives are set up are not intended to accommodate multiple roles at 100%. You'll probably have been crankier than usual, easily irritated. Much of what we are missing from our lives currently shapes our identities. We value them intensely, and what's more, it's those things that we typically rely on in times of stress and adversity, so it's a double whammy. But all these feelings I've spoken about so far have been negative. So what about mixed emotions? What have you got to feel optimistic about, and how can we change our mindsets in a more positive direction? Oh, sorry, it's got a little URL that's come up, so I'll ignore the URL. Okay. Psychologists have traditionally viewed emotions as falling along a single dimension, ranging from positive, such as happy or excited, to negative, such as sad or anxious. This implies at any given moment we feel good or bad, but not both. Positive and negative emotions has even been said to mutually inhibit each other. So if you're enjoying your day but receive some bad news, your positive mood is supposedly replaced by a negative one. However, an alternative view suggests positive and negative emotions vary independently, and so they can occur simultaneously. This allows the experience of mixed emotions, such as feeling both happy and sad, or nervous and excited at the same time. There's now extensive evidence for the existence of mixed emotions, and new data reveals they may be surprisingly common. In a recent study from March and April this year, while 72% of people were experiencing negative emotions, only 3% reported pure negative feelings, while 70% reported feeling mixed emotions, including joy, fun, and satisfaction. And then there's optimism. We might need to reframe our narrative a bit to feel more positive than negative thoughts. But as we're going through a period of easing of further lockdown restrictions, we have much more to be optimistic about. Most of us can remember periods of national and societal distress, such as 9/11 or previous recessions, for example. From each of those experiences, our world and our economies became stronger and more resilient. We developed personal mindsets and systems that allowed us to adapt to the changes around us, to create new ways of relating to one another and new approaches to safeguarding ourselves from similar future shocks. We learned lessons that help us reach new heights of innovation and endurance, the legacies of which we still benefit from today. But more than history, we also know that moments like this can galvanise both our personal resilience and our wider sense of community. Paradoxically, even at a time when we're being told to stay away from one another, we feel a greater sense of connectedness to each other. We are, in one way or another, all in this together, and indeed the premise of part of the purpose of Agents Together is exactly that. Yes, some of us are going to feel the impact of these days much more than others, but it's because we're all impacted by this pandemic that we should be optimistic. Times like this give us a common cause. They create opportunities for conscientious compassion. They unite us through adversity, even if that adversity is unevenly distributed. It's true that some of us have a predisposition by character to optimism, while others have a more pessimistic nature. It's the glass half full or half empty conundrum. But while we might have an innate drive towards pessimism or optimism generally, there are things we can do to encourage a more optimistic outlook. Research has shown that optimism is a potentially modifiable condition. That means we can make an active choice to be more positive about life. It's also been shown scientifically that optimists adjust better than pessimists to stressful situations. So what can we do to feel positive about, and how do we manage that? So the sudden necessity to stay home or minimise our social activities has provided people with time to stop, to reflect and to readjust. Up until 3 months ago, ours was a society obsessed with creating content, being seen to do things and be places. Now there's a new emphasis on doing less and making the place you're already in a better one. This isn't a new phenomenon. Counterbalancing modern society's long working hours and social media addictions, people have simultaneously, perhaps unsurprisingly, started to focus more on home in recent years. Much of the population has rediscovered the simple pleasures of gardening or baking, meditation, while the concept of hygge has spread far beyond Scandinavian shores and become a global obsession. Similarly, it seems that the younger generation increasingly choose to shirk nightclubs in favour of Netflix marathons on the sofa. So this investment in nurturing domestic space couldn't have come at a better time, now that we're all prohibited from spending much time elsewhere. Likewise, the shift from needing to be busy, social and well-travelled, and equally important being seen to be all these things, to now needing to adjust to a quieter, less active life, is both beneficial to us mentally, physically, spiritually and economically, and of course to our planet. Where travel, consumerism and Instagrammable experiences were once deemed aspirational, they're now beginning to be deemed as frivolous and almost crass. Restraint has become the new buzzword. This pandemic seems to have inspired more altruistic aspirations, focusing instead on communities, social improvement and the environment. The majority of us have understood for some time how seriously our lifestyle choices were jeopardising our societal bonds, the planet and our mental and physical health. But to turn the tide on these issues had seemed too gargantuan and overwhelming a prospect to completely reasonably contemplate. However, perhaps the biggest surprise of the pandemic has been just how quickly these issues have started to be reversed and how easily we have all adjusted to the new state of play. The last 3 months have given people a glimpse of a world reimagined, a simpler world where community comes first and people have the time and space to appreciate things more. With no access to restaurants, galleries or the high street, our daily walk has become our new indulgence. Having the opportunity to rediscover the area we live in and to stop and talk to neighbours or local shop workers, albeit at a 2-metre distance, has become highly restorative. It's once again becoming normal to smile at, talk to and care about those that surround us. And in the process, we are building a more compassionate, responsible and resilient community. This can also be seen in the rush to support local producers and businesses, whether ordering food from local farmers, buying bread from the baker down the road, flowers direct from growers. We have been actively supporting our local businesses. And as an estate agent, many of you are part of those local businesses, providing an invaluable service to your communities. Thinking of yourself in those positive terms can put a different perspective on your working life. Going forward, it's vital that we remain as realistic as well as optimistic as possible about the threat of coronavirus. After all, we currently have no idea what a potential second or third wave of the virus could look like and how it might further affect us personally and globally. However, for the moment, we can take some comfort in the news that the curve continues to flatten and restrictions are gradually being eased. So let's allow ourselves a moment to feel hope rather than fear. It's important that as individuals and as an industry, you continue to demonstrate the empathy so many of you showed during lockdown and make sure you continue to be actively involved in the local communities you work within. And if you feel anxious or uncertain about your career or business, proactively seek help. The Agents Together mentor scheme is a great place to start for one-on-one support. This experience has softened us, humbled us, humanised us, and in doing so has offered us the chance to create a new kind of future. There might never again be something so powerful as this opportunity in our lifetimes to press the reset button. Let's not take that opportunity for granted. As I've said many times, it's okay not to feel okay. It's perfectly normal to experience a wide range of emotions during a time like this. Talking to your loved ones or sharing your concerns with friends or colleagues is the best way to manage some of these feelings. But for some of you, I appreciate that won't be enough. If you feel overwhelmed by your emotions or they're getting in the way of your daily activities, then it's definitely worth having a chat with a professional who'll be able to advise you. Agents Together has compiled a comprehensive list of people who will help you, whether you're having mental health, financial, or relationship difficulties. Visit the Agents Together website to see a full directory of organisations that can help. They're all just a phone call or an email away. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you have any questions, please do email them to the Agents Together team.